Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, an enigma. The creator of Sherlock Holmes, the detective who is the embodiment of logic and a tireless promoter of basing theories on facts, was himself a believer in fairies, in spirits, and in the pseudoscience of phrenology. Introduced in the late 1700s by German physician Franz Joseph Gall, phrenology was based on the belief that the shape of the skull reflects a person's mental abilities and reveals specific character traits. Gall came to this conclusion when, in his school days, he had noticed that the most intelligent student in his class had noticeably prominent eyes and a large forehead. Gall rationalized that just like muscles that increase in size with exercise, parts of the brain that are used the most expand and then distort the skull, producing bumps that are then amenable to analysis. Intelligence, mathematical skills, musicality, and numerous characteristics such as love of children and desire to own material things could be determined by studying an individual's skull. Conan Doyle brought into this and depicted both Sherlock Holmes as well as his highly intelligent archenemy, Professor Moriarty, as having dominant foreheads. Upon finally encountering Holmes, Moriarty remarks that Holmes has less frontal development than he would have expected. Interestingly, Conan Doyle himself had a prominent forehead. The author, who hailed from Edinburgh, could well have been influenced by George and Andrew Combe, who had founded the Edinburgh Phrenological Society. The building still stands today, decorated with the busts of the Combes as well as those of Gall and his disciple Johann Spurzheim. The term phrenology was actually coined by Spurzheim, who went on to claim that diagnosis of traits by examination of the shape of the cranium was important because these traits could be altered. People whose skulls showed signs of a weak intelligence were not doomed, Spurzheim maintained. If they were identified and provided with means of education, the appropriate part of their brain would be exercised and would increase in size, boosting their intelligence. Spurzheim's lectures popularized phrenology first in Victorian England, then in America, where his methods were adopted by the brothers Lorenzo and Orson Fowler, who became noted phrenologists. Even commercialized skulls marked with areas representing different attributes. Companies based hiring practices on phrenological analysis. Marriage partners were selected based on skull shapes, and parents were keen to learn about their children's future prospects by putting them in the hands of phrenologists. Lorenzo later hung out a shingle in London that led to an encounter with Mark Twain, who poked fun at Fowler by remarking that the phrenologist had found on his skull a cavity where humor ought to be. Many cartoonists also had fun at the phrenologist's expense, as it became clear that there was no evidence of a link between bumps on the head and innate characteristics. In 1905, Henry Lavery elevated the level of nonsense by patenting the psychograph, an electrical device that measured bumps on the head to determine a person's mental aptitude on a scale that ranged from deficient to very superior. The only thing that was superior was the gibberish spouted on behalf of the psychograph. While phrenology has no scientific basis, phrenologists do deserve credit of sorts for introducing the idea that different parts of the brain have different functions. Today we know that speech, sight, motor function, and judgment are controlled by different parts of the brain. Interestingly, in science, we emphasize coming to a conclusion based on proper interpretation of an observation. But phrenologists came to the right conclusion based on the misinterpretation of an observation. And that for today is our Cup of Joe.